be okay just to switch on the same mic? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. My name's Elizabeth Larison, and I'm here with my colleague, Carin Kuoni, to talk about what it means to defend solidarity. So welcome to Cultural Freedom Demands Collective Courage. We'll both introduce our organizations and what we do and look at a recent initiative that our two organizations embarked on this year, which centers on solidarity across the cultural sector. And we'll also reflect on what the meaning of solidarity is and why it's important in this time, and then look to what we're doing next. Hopefully you've heard of the National Coalition Against Censorship before, but if you haven't, I'm here to tell you that it's a free expression advocacy organization that was founded 50 years ago by affiliates associated with the American Civil Liberties Union. Today, we are an alliance of over 60 national nonprofits working across civil society in literature, publishing, education, professional associations and labor groups, and even religious organizations, all focusing on the freedom of expression and what that means, the freedom of speech, thought, and inquiry. Within the Arts and Culture Advocacy Program that I run, we give direct support to artists, curators, and cultural institutions that are facing censorship pressure. So we do direct case advocacy intervention. We also run a program in which we provide direct resources and do research and disseminate resources directly into the hands of people who need them so that they can empower themselves and also uphold freedom of expression and particularly artistic freedom in their own lives and communities.
Hi, thank you very much for the invitation. So I'm Carin, I'm the director of the Vera Center for Art and Politics at the New School, which is an artist-focused research center and public forum for art, culture, and politics. We support art that fearlessly engages urgent political issues and empowers people to reimagine what political participation and engagement might be. We thrive on partnerships and collaborations. Informed by our international network of partners, we produce artist fellowships, the Jane Lombard Prize for Art and Social Justice, our open access VLC seminars, exhibitions, and publications. And guided by with many other values, but guided by institutional values of reciprocity and relationality, which are core to the concept of solidarity, these programs are structured around 2-year focus themes, which are basically deep research frameworks that allow us to explore and learn how different communities and different societies approach a shared concern. Partnerships within institutional networks are often at the heart of solidarity. They are much like living things. They need care, continuity, and trust. And our partnership with NCAC is one of those, long-standing, resilient, and rooted in shared values. And when I say long-standing, I actually mean it. We go back more than 3 decades. The VLC was founded in 1992, I gather, just the same year that CC ArtsLink was founded, which was during, or at the height of the culture wars. And I'm talking here about the first culture wars. At the time, like today, dominated by heated debates about identity politics, public funding for the arts, and freedom of expression. And NCAC and the VLC, the Vera Center, became natural allies. So let me just pull up for the next slide, and it gives you information on 2 moments of this shared history. The first one on the right documents an event called How Obscene Is This? The Decency Clause turned 20. It's the first example when in 2010 we revisited over 3 weeks of film screenings, panel discussions, lectures and programs, the introduction and the lasting impact of the NEA's so-called Decency Clause, which originally was targeting artists like Andres Serrano, Robert Mapplethorpe, Karen Finley and others, that continues to shape the arts funding and cultural discourse today. 2 years later, we followed with museum best practices for managing controversy, a set of national guidelines developed in response to congressional uproar when the National Portrait Gallery presented Hide, Seek, Difference and Desire in American Portraiture, an exhibition that considered such themes as the role of sexual orientation in depicting modern America. Designed to help institutions transform public outrage into moments of learning and dialogue, these guidelines were ultimately endorsed by the AAM, the Alliance of American Museums, CAA, the College Art Association, Americans for the Arts, CIMAM, the International Committee for Museums and Collections of Modern Art, a large international consortium. Both projects exemplify our shared commitment to keep art and institutions open and responsive to difficult conversations. And maybe, Elizabeth, will you speak about our current initiative?
Yeah, so early this year, I was in touch with Carin. We published the Museum Best Practices, I think, in 2012, and we were talking about what it means now. Does this document need to be updated in the current moment? But it quickly became clear to us that the political ground on which we were operating was shifting greatly. Starting the beginning of the year, of course, we all know, a slew of constitutionally questionable executive orders, threats upon the Smithsonian Institution, the takeover of the Kennedy Center, and a big question of whether and how national federal agencies that support art and culture, questions about whether they would be able to do so in the same way. It obviated a need and a different kind of need as the cultural sector was sort of reeling and unsure of how to operate. So we worked to convene a group of leaders to probe the question of what is needed. In May of 2025, in collaboration, we hosted a convening at the National Coalition Against Censorship. Thank you. With leaders across the cultural sector, talking leaders of national arts associations, leaders of small arts organizations, lawyers in the free speech and in the arts sectors, strategic communications professionals, and even funders were in the room to talk about what is needed right now? What does the field need right now that we don't have? And one of the answers to that question was resounding, which is there was a need for a vehicle through which we could forge an alliance, forge solidarity in resistance to the pressures on the cultural sector in that moment. Of course, I didn't even mention, it became quite clear what was wanted from the federal government, which was celebrations of the country's 250th birthday and maybe a sculpture garden of heroes, right? Not always in alignment with all of our very divergent interests and work. It was decided from the group that this sort of vehicle, a statement or a declaration, would need to be positive, affirmative, not politically divided on either side, but forthright in its values and principles. Like, what does it mean? What is the value of culture in this moment? Over the course of 2 months, over 40 different people across the cultural sector, not just people in this photo, contributed or gave feedback to what this sort of statement would contain, what it would need to sort of bring in the support of institutions and cultural institutions specifically across the US. And the final product is quite clear. Cultural freedom demands collective courage. Could we go to the next slide? Thank you so much. In August, we publicly launched this initiative focusing on key values of arts and culture and what we need to survive this moment. With apologies, I've lost my place here. The key point of this was an expression of resistance, not just to those in power who want compliance and blind compliance at that, but also as a connective expression of solidarity, of democratic values, of artistic freedom, which signals both to peers in our organizational and cultural communities, but also the stakeholders, funders, artists, curators, people who rely on these institutions and structures to do their own work, to signal a commitment to organizational and individual values in the face of these pressures. Not every cultural institution has the same priorities or focus. That was a known. But we all can unite in recognizing and enacting our freedom to pursue and present different topics and forms in the field of art and culture.
So you have some of the core principles and the beginning of this statement listed here, and maybe we don't need to read this together, but I just want to emphasize that there are certain core principles that inform these statements. One of them is that for the very first time, or in very clear language, the statement names the core principle that we do not go without, that is non-negotiable, which is what Emily said earlier, and it is the freedom of expression. We also assert that our work, whether it's artistic, cultural, or programmatic, is fundamental to democracy, using the argument of more conservative and reactionary and possibly more powerful forces at the moment to turn it against themselves. We are doing this work on behalf of democratic values. And the statement demonstrates that we are doing so as part of a nationwide movement from the East Coast to the West in solidarity with, but also with the collective force of others.
One key component in solidarity initiatives often is publicness. Taking a stand together visibly and publicly is quite important. And so with that, we can go to the next slide. We launched a website which lists all of the signatories of the Statement of Values. To date, we have over 270 organizations, over 880 individuals, most of which represent people working across the field of art and culture who have endorsed this. The website lists this, but not just that, it also provides ways to amplify that publicity, amplify that publicness, to make it known. And necessarily, of course, it doesn't end here. We've also developed recently Collective Courage Conversation Series, which is an online event which look to put the tools of solidarity out publicly and so that we can share them with each other. Naturally and necessarily, many of us are making up things as we go along, being creative, finding new solutions in this moment. And this conversation series is going to look to bring those solutions, those strategies, publicly for us to share with each other. We had our first one a couple weeks ago, focusing on the legal landscape of art censorship in the US. We are in the works putting an event together for November 21st in line with Fall of Freedom, which is another great public-facing initiative, amplifying the work of arts and culture. But we will be looking at topics such as what it means to put together a board or align your board in support of your mission and what that really means in this time. We'll have topics associating shortcomings and shortfalls with budgets and how curators and organizations are responding to this sort of pivot right now. There are many other topics that are we're lining up, and we'll be announcing them on our website in the coming weeks. So stay tuned. And if you haven't signed the statement yet, please check it out and consider doing so and sharing it with a friend.
I want to emphasize that scale really matters. So the statement that we introduced earlier, it's signed by small and large institutions across the entire country, and the collective of these institutions provides force, power, also protection to some extent. And the same function is served by this wonderful initiative called Fall of Freedom, again on November 21, when throughout the country institutions are invited to participate and call for freedom of expression and ongoing commitment to it. At the Vera List Center, we take the work on the statement further by joining the Fall of Freedom protest on November 21 with a 12-hour collective reading entitled Studies into Darkness, a reading marathon on freedom of speech. Together with contributing artists, writers, curators, and organizers, we will gather from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. to read from the Vera List Center anthology entitled Studies into Darkness, The Perils and Promise of Freedom of Speech, a book that explores who gets to speak, when, and under what conditions. 3 years after this book's publication, those questions have only become more urgent, as we've heard all morning long. And so we'd like to end with a response to Simon's prompt to articulate a pertinent question for this moment. It's not only about who has the right to free expression, but also the context demands of us to ask who has the responsibility to defend this right? Who has the responsibility to claim and protect the rights to programmatic, artistic, and cultural freedom? Our answer, speaking maybe from on behalf of both of us, is it is us, cultural workers, artists, educators, participants in civil society. It is us that need to defend this right. Join us on November 21st, and thank you also very much for being here. And the signatories to the statement have been instrumental in getting us where we are, so we want to acknowledge their contributions sincerely. Thank you.